The summer air over Central Asia once carried nothing more than the hum of caravans and the whisper of desert winds. But by the 8th century, this land, crossroads of empires, the artery of the Silk Road, was about to become the stage where two titans collided. Few today remember the Battle of Talas, yet its echoes shaped centuries, altered civilizations, and even changed the way knowledge spread across the world. To understand Talas, we must look first at the empires that loomed like mountains over the horizon. The Abbasid Caliphate in the west, and the Tang Dynasty of China in the east. Both were heirs of broken worlds. Both rose from the ashes of fallen dynasties. Both carried visions of universal rule, and both believed that the Silk Road, that lifeline of commerce and culture, belonged to them. The rise of the Islamic Caliphate. A century earlier, the Arabian Peninsula had been a land of tribes and scattered kingdoms, but with the rise of Islam, history bent sharply. In less than 100 years, the Muslims of the Rashidun Caliphate shattered the Byzantine hold over Syria, destroyed the mighty Sassanid Empire of Persia, and carved out an empire stretching from the shores of Spain to the frontiers of India. These conquests were not only about swords and banners. They brought with them the Quran, new systems of governance, fresh trade networks, and the bonds of a faith that united diverse peoples under one creed. In the markets of Damascus, the mosques of Kufa, and the libraries of Basra, the world began to change. After the Rashidun came the Umayyads, who pushed even further east. Their armies crossed mountains, deserts, and rivers, reaching into the mysterious lands beyond Persia, Transoxiana, the land beyond the Oxus River. Here, in Samarkand and Bukhara, along caravan routes where merchants traded silks for spices, the Muslims built fortresses and carved footholds. For the first time, Islam and China stood on the edge of each other's horizons. The power of the Tang Dynasty. Meanwhile, in the east, another giant stirred. The Tang Dynasty had risen in 1618 AD, reviving the grandeur of Han China. By the mid-8th century, the Tang court in Chang'an glittered as the wealthiest and most cosmopolitan capital in the world. Its markets teemed with Persian traders, Indian monks, Arab envoys, and even Roman descendants from far-off Byzantium. Silk, porcelain, and paper flowed outward. Gold, gems, and horses flowed inward. The Tang emperors were not content with riches alone. They wanted dominion. Their armies rode across the steppes, subdued the Turkic Khanates, pressed the Tibetans into check, and brought dozens of Central Asian states under their suzerainty. The Great Wall might have protected China's heart, but the Tang ambition was to extend influence far beyond it, into the fertile valleys and caravan routes of Central Asia. By 715 AD, Tang generals were already intervening in the politics of the Fergana Valley. With Tibetan allies and Turkic mercenaries, they struck against local rulers who leaned toward Islam. The message was clear. The Tang Dynasty intended to be the arbiter of Central Asia. But two suns cannot shine in the same sky. By the early 8th century, the Caliphate and the Tang were expanding along the same roads, each claiming the right to protect caravans, control fortresses, and collect tribute. The Silk Road was too valuable, a river of wealth that carried silk, porcelain, spices, slaves, and silver. Whoever controlled it could choke or enrich half the world. For a while, the two giants circled each other through proxies. Local kingdoms called for help, and first the Tang answered, then the Muslims, then the Tang again. In 715, Tang armies crushed Arab forces in Fergana. In 717, Tang allies, the Karluks, repelled the Umayyads again. Yet the Muslims did not abandon the field. Slowly, fortress by fortress, they crept back, converting cities, forging alliances, and waiting for their moment. That moment came in 750, when the Abbasid revolution swept across the Islamic world. The Umayyads, with their Damascus palaces and dynastic pride, were swept aside. In their place came the Abbasids, claiming descent from the Prophet's uncle, promising justice, and determined to secure their empire. Their new capital at Baghdad would soon become a beacon of learning. But first, the Abbasids had to prove their strength on the battlefield, and their gaze turned east. Storm clouds over Asia. Meanwhile, the Tang Dynasty seemed at the height of its glory. But ambition has a way of overreaching. In 747, Tang General Gao Xianxi launched a brilliant campaign into Gilgit, in modern-day Pakistan, defeating Tibetan allies and forcing mountain kingdoms into submission. His victories swelled Tang confidence. Soon his eyes turned northward, to Tashkent, a city divided by feuding princes. Gao intervened. He captured the city, executed its ruler, and placed a puppet on the throne. But brutality breeds rebellion. The people of Tashkent, outraged by his cruelty, sent envoys westward to the Abbasid Caliphate. Their plea was simple: help us. In Samarkand, Abbasid general Ziyad ibn Saleh answered the call. He rallied Arab infantry, seasoned veterans of the Abbasid revolution, and Turkic cavalry hardened by the steppe. From the fertile valleys of Khorasan, reinforcements poured in. They marched eastward, banners snapping in the wind, faith and vengeance burning in their hearts. Two empires were now set on a collision course. The Tang sought to expand their supremacy. The Abbasids sought to defend their honor and secure their borders. In the summer of 751, on the banks of the Talas River, the storm would finally break.
The year was 751. Central Asia, land of valleys and deserts, mountains and caravan routes, became the stage of destiny. For years, whispers had carried the rumor: the Arabs are pushing east, the Chinese are pressing west. At some point, their armies would meet. Now that meeting could no longer be delayed. The spark of Tashkent. The execution of the ruler of Tashkent by Tang General Gao Xianxi had lit the fire. To the Tang court in Chang'an, it seemed a minor act of discipline, a local leader replaced by someone more loyal. but to the people of Transoxiana it was tyranny. Cities that had watched the Tang with wary eyes now recoiled in anger. Envoys galloped westward, bearing desperate pleas to the new masters of the Islamic world, the Abbasids. In Samarkand, the Abbasid governor received them. Their story was simple. The Chinese general has shed innocent blood. Will you stand idle as strangers rule our cities? The Abbasids, fresh from victory in their revolution, could not ignore such a call. Their legitimacy depended not only on lineage, but also on strength. To defend Tashkent meant to prove that their banner was not a weak one. The order was given: war. The Abbasid muster. General Zayad ibn Saleh, a veteran commander with scars of past battles, was tasked with the campaign. He summoned his troops, Arab infantry from Khorasan, men who had fought in the revolution against the Umayyads and carried the zeal of a cause not long won. Alongside them came Turkish horsemen, swift, fierce, and skilled in steppe warfare. These Turks were not yet fully Muslim, but many fought under the Abbasid banners for gold, loyalty, or alliances. Their presence gave the Abbasids speed and flexibility against the Tang's heavily armored ranks. More reinforcements poured in from Samarkand and Bukhara, cities that had once leaned toward Tang protection, but now saw salvation in the Caliphate's armies. Veterans of the revolution marched with confidence, their black Abbasid banners fluttering in the desert winds. The army that moved east was not the largest the Abbasids had ever fielded, but it was one forged in fire. Unity of purpose, discipline of faith, and hunger for victory bound them together. Gao Jianzhi and the Tang response. Meanwhile, on the other side, General Gao Jianzhi was preparing as well. Gao was no ordinary commander. Of Korean origin, he had risen in the Tang ranks by sheer brilliance. His campaigns in Gilgit and Central Asia had won him both fame and enemies. To the Tang emperor, Gao was indispensable, a man who extended the empire's reach with every victory. When news arrived that the Abbasids were marching east, Gao did not hesitate. He gathered his forces, Tang infantry drilled in formation, archers with deadly precision, and the famous Tang crossbowmen, whose bolts could pierce armor at 100 paces. With him, too, were his allies, the Karluks, a Turkic people who had long served as auxiliaries for the Tang. He trusted them. He had fought beside them. He believed their loyalty would hold. It was a belief that would soon prove fatal. The march toward destiny. As spring ripened into summer, both armies moved. Dust rose over the steppes as thousands of boots, hooves, and wheels pressed east and west. Merchants abandoned caravans, farmers fled their fields. Rumors spread like wildfire. The Arabs and the Chinese are coming. The Abbasid army crossed rivers and deserts, their banners black as the night sky, their voices lifted in Quranic recitation as they prepared for war. The Tang army advanced from the east, disciplined columns moving with the precision of empire. Each side knew the other was formidable. Each side knew that this was no mere border skirmish, but a clash that could decide the fate of Central Asia. Numbers and speculation. Arab and Chinese sources disagree wildly on how many soldiers stood at Talas. Chinese records claim the Abbasids had hundreds of thousands, while Arab chronicles insist the Tang were the more numerous. Modern scholars, cutting through exaggerations, estimate that each side fielded between 30 and 50,000 men, enough to darken the valley with steel, arrows, and banners. The Abbasid army drew its strength from diversity. Arabs, Persians, Turks, Khorasanis. It was an army of many peoples, united under the Abbasid flag. The Tang army was equally mixed: Chinese infantry, Central Asian auxiliaries, and Karluk horsemen. On both sides, men marched not only for empire, but for plunder, for loyalty, and for survival. The Valley of Talas. By midsummer, both armies arrived at the Talas River, a broad ribbon of water winding through the valley. To the north lay rolling hills, to the south the rugged mountains. The Silk Road itself passed nearby, the ancient trade route whose wealth had drawn both empires here. As camps were built and scouts skirmished, tension filled the air. Campfires glowed in the night, one horizon lit by Arab tents, the other by Tang soldiers. Horses neighed restlessly, men sharpened swords and whispered prayers. Each side waited for dawn, knowing the valley would soon run red. And then, in the heat of July, the armies formed ranks. Shields rose, spears bristled, banners waved. The air was heavy with dust and silence, broken only by the sound of drums and horns. The Battle of Talas was about to begin.
At dawn, the 5th day of July 751, the Valley of Talas awoke to a sight it had never seen before. 2 oceans of men stretched across the plains, banners snapping in the dry wind. On one side, the Abbasid army, their black standards of revolution casting long shadows, their soldiers drawn from Khorasan, Persia, and the Arabian deserts. On the other, the Tang forces, disciplined and glittering, their formations bristling with spears and their archers ready to rain death. Between them lay the river, winding like a thin scar across the earth. Day 1. The opening storm. The battle began with the thunder of hooves. Tang cavalry charged first, armored horses pounding the earth, lances lowered. The Abbasid front braced for impact, shields locked, spears angled. They met the charge with a roar. The crash echoed across the valley. Arrows filled the sky. The Tang archers unleashed volley after volley, their famed crossbows cutting down lines of Abbasid infantry. Men fell screaming, shields splintered, armor pierced. Yet the Abbasid archers answered in kind, their shafts darkening the sky, their bows bending until their arms ached. By sunset, both sides had tested the other and found neither willing to break. The field was littered with the fallen, but no victor emerged. Day 2. Hammer and counter-hammer. The second day dawned hotter. Dust clung to armor, sweat stung eyes, but the generals demanded blood. General Gao Xianji directed his heavy infantry forward, disciplined Chinese spearmen in layered armor, shields overlapping like scales. They advanced steadily, pushing back the Abbasid front line inch by inch. Ziyad ibn Saleh responded with cunning. He sent his Turkish horsemen wheeling around the flanks. With curved sabers flashing, they cut into the Tang rear. For a moment, panic threatened Gao's formations, but the Tang general, calm and precise, rallied his troops. Crossbowmen turned, loosing deadly bolts into the cavalry. Horses reared, riders fell, and the Abbasid flank withdrew. The day ended in stalemate once again, the valley filled with corpses, the air thick with the stench of blood. Day 3. The test of endurance. By the third day, exhaustion gnawed at both armies. The sun beat down mercilessly. Men fought and collapsed from thirst as much as from wounds. Yet still the battle raged. The Abbasids pressed the center, their infantry advancing in disciplined ranks. Quranic recitations rose above the clash, voices steady even as blades struck flesh. The Tang lines bent but did not break. Their armor glinted, their formations held. Gao Xianji himself was seen riding along the front, urging his men forward with calm authority. The clash of steel rang from dawn to dusk. At times the Abbasids surged forward, only to be driven back by crossbows. At other times the Tang pressed hard, only to be checked by Abbasid cavalry. Neither army could claim the field. The valley seemed cursed, swallowing men by the thousands, without granting victory to either side. Day 4. The stalemate deepens. By the fourth day, both sides were near breaking. Supplies dwindled, water was scarce, horses stumbled from exhaustion. Still, pride and duty drove the soldiers onward. That day, Gao tried a bold maneuver. He ordered his Karluk allies, Turkic horsemen, to press the Abbasid flanks with all their force. For hours, the Karluks fought fiercely, their arrows harassing the Abbasid lines, their lances darting in and out. Ziyad ibn Saleh countered with discipline, pulling his infantry into tight squares, bristling with spears. The Abbasids held firm, refusing to yield. By nightfall, the valley was a graveyard. Neither side had achieved a decisive breakthrough. The Abbasid banners still flew. The Tang formation still stood. Both armies believed the fifth day would decide all. A battle hanging in the balance. For 4 days Talas had witnessed carnage without resolution. Arrows littered the ground like black rain. Broken shields and snapped spears lay scattered across the valley. The cries of the wounded mingled with the silence of the dead. Yet beneath the dust and blood, something was shifting. The Karluks, long allies of the Tang, had begun to hesitate. Whispers moved through their ranks. They had seen the strength of the Abbasids. They had watched the Tang falter. Loyalty wavered. Neither Gao Xianji nor Ziyad ibn Saleh yet knew it, but the fifth day would not be like the rest. It would decide not only the battle, but the fate of Central Asia. And it would come not from discipline or valor, but from betrayal.
The morning of the fifth day dawned heavy and silent. Both camps stirred slowly, men dragging themselves from sleep, their bodies bruised, their weapons caked with dust and blood. 4 days of unrelenting struggle had stripped the armies of their strength, yet the will to fight remained unbroken. Every soldier knew this day would decide all. The Abbasid banners fluttered defiantly in the rising sun. Ziyad ibn Salah rode among his men, his voice steady, reminding them that patience and perseverance had always brought victory to the believers. Across the field, Tang General Gao Xianji prepared his troops with measured calm. He was exhausted, but not defeated. His confidence rested on numbers, discipline, and the support of his Karluk allies. But beneath the surface, something was about to rupture. The calm before the storm. At first, the battle unfolded as it had before. Tang infantry marched forward in dense blocks, their shields locking together like the scales of a dragon. Behind them, crossbowmen loosed deadly bolts, their weapons humming with precision. Abbasid infantry braced themselves, shields raised, voices lifted in chants of resolute. Cavalry from both sides swept across the flanks, clashing in clouds of dust, horses screaming, sabers flashing. The clash of iron rang louder than thunder. Once again, the valley of Talas shook beneath the weight of two empires. But then, amid the storm of steel, a new sound erupted, a deafening cry. The Karluks had turned. The betrayal. For years, the Karluks had fought beside the Tang. They had served as allies, auxiliaries, and mercenaries. Gao trusted them, counted them as the hinge of his cavalry. But loyalty on the steppes was bought with opportunity, not promises. The Karluks had watched the battle, had seen the Abbasids hold their ground. They judged the future, and in that moment they chose a different master. Without warning, the Karluk horsemen wheeled their mounts, their arrows no longer aimed at Abbasid ranks, but at the Tang. They descended on their former allies with savage fury, stabbing, slashing, betraying. The Tang army staggered in shock. Soldiers cried out in disbelief as men who had ridden at their side now cut them down from behind. General Gao, seeing the treachery, tried desperately to rally his men. "Hold the lines! Do not falter!" he shouted, his voice carrying over the chaos. But betrayal is a poison that spreads faster than any wound. The Tang ranks wavered, their flanks collapsing under the sudden assault. The Abbasids strike. Ziyad ibn Saleh saw his moment. With precision, he ordered a full frontal assault. Abbasid infantry surged forward, shields raised, swords gleaming in the sun. Their Turkish cavalry swept around the sides, joining the Karluks in pressing the Tang from every angle. Caught between hammer and anvil, the Tang army crumbled. Arrows rained from behind, blades crashed in front, and the once disciplined formations dissolved into chaos. Men fought desperately, some trying to push forward, others turning to flee. Horses trampled the fallen, banners toppled into the dust. The valley echoed with cries of anguish, the clash of collapsing order. The Tang army had endured 4 days of balanced war, but now, in a single hour, it was undone. Gao's desperate escape. General Gao Xianji refused to surrender. With a small corps of loyal guards, he hacked his way through the chaos, desperate to save what remained. Around him his men fell one by one, their bodies forming a shield of flesh and blood. Finally, with only a few thousand survivors, Gao broke free from the battlefield. He rode hard, retreating eastward, abandoning tens of thousands of comrades to their fate. The Tang army had collapsed. What remained of it was slaughtered or scattered across the plains. The Abbasids and their allies stood victorious. The banners of the Caliphate waved over a field of ash, dust, and broken spears. The aftermath of the 5th day. The cost was immense. Tens of thousands lay dead upon the valley floor. The once green banks of the Talas River were stained dark with blood. The cries of the wounded carried into the night, mingling with the crackle of burning camps. But amidst the carnage, the Abbasids had secured more than a victory. They had shattered China's influence in Central Asia. Never again would a Tang army march so far west. The balance of power along the Silk Road had shifted forever. For the Tang, Talas was a scar that never healed. Though Gao survived, his defeat became infamous. Within 4 years, disaster struck his empire at home. The An Lushan Rebellion, a civil war that tore China apart and claimed millions of lives. The Tang would never recover their Western ambitions. For the Abbasids, Talas was proof of strength. They had defended their frontier, humbled the greatest empire of the East, and shown the world that Islam's reach extended deep into Asia. Though they would not hold these lands for long, the symbolic victory was undeniable. The silence after the storm. As the dust settled, the valley of Talas grew silent once more. The river flowed on, indifferent to the bodies lining its banks. The mountains watched in stillness, as they had watched countless battles before. But history had shifted. From betrayal and bloodshed, a new order was born. The Tang Dynasty retreated. The Abbasids stood ascendant, and the Turkic tribes, once mercenaries, now tasted the promise of power. A promise that would, in time, reshape the world in ways none could yet imagine.
The valley of Talas lay silent when the clash ended. Thousands of corpses lined the riverbanks, banners of the Tang trampled into the dust, Abbasid black flags still fluttering in the hot wind. The battle was over, but its consequences were only beginning. Few battles in history appear so small in immediate scale, yet ripple so far across centuries. The end of Tang ambitions. For the Tang Dynasty, Talas was the breaking point. General Gao Shangji returned east with only a fraction of his once mighty force. Though he remained respected for past victories, the shadow of Talas clung to his name. The Tang court in Chang'an tried to recover. New soldiers were mustered, envoys sent westward, attempts made to restore authority in Central Asia. But just 4 years later, in 755, catastrophe struck at home. The An Lushan rebellion erupted, a massive uprising that consumed northern China, devastated cities, and killed millions. With their empire bleeding from within, the Tang no longer had the strength to look west. Their ambitions in Central Asia died at Talas. No Chinese army would march so far again. The Abbasids and the Turks. For the Abbasids, victory at Talas brought honor and legitimacy. Their revolution against the Umayyads was still fresh, and they needed triumphs to prove their right to rule. Talas gave them that triumph. Across the Islamic world, news spread. The Caliphate had humbled the most powerful empire of the East. Yet the Abbasids did not truly conquer Central Asia. The land was too vast, its tribes too independent, its loyalties too fragile. What they did secure was influence, political, cultural, and religious. The Turkic peoples, who had once fought as auxiliaries, now began to look to Islam not only as a source of alliance, but as a faith. Over the coming decades, tribe by tribe, the Turks embraced Islam. This change was monumental. From those Turkic peoples would rise future dynasties, the Seljuks, who dominated Persia and Anatolia, the Mamluks, who defended Egypt, and in time the Ottomans, whose empire would rule for centuries. The Turks who betrayed the Tang at Talas became, in a sense, the bridge between China and the Islamic world, and between past and future. The secret of paper. But perhaps the greatest legacy of Talas was not political, but cultural. Among the prisoners captured by the Abbasids were Chinese artisans, men who carried with them a guarded secret, the art of making paper. For centuries, the Chinese had perfected the technique, keeping it hidden from outsiders. Paper was lighter than parchment, cheaper than silk, easier to produce than vellum. It was the material upon which an empire wrote its laws, recorded its poetry, and preserved its wisdom. In the aftermath of Talas, that secret traveled west. The Abbasids established the first paper mill in their new capital, Baghdad. From there, the technology spread like wildfire. Cairo, Damascus, Cordoba, all would soon have their own mills. Books multiplied, knowledge became portable, libraries swelled with volumes of science, philosophy, medicine, and law. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad, where scholars translated Greek philosophy, Persian science, and Indian mathematics into Arabic, owed its existence in part to that moment. Without paper, such a revolution of learning might never have occurred. From Baghdad, the written word spread into Europe, planting seeds that centuries later would bloom into the Renaissance. A battle of civilizations. In the end, the Battle of Talas was not about a map changing hands. No kings were dethroned, no capitals captured. It was not a conquest in the traditional sense, but its significance lay deeper. It marked the end of China's westward expansion, locking the Tang within their own frontiers. It marked the Abbasids' rise as a global power, whose influence stretched not only across the Islamic world, but into the very heart of Asia. It revealed the shifting role of the Turks, who would shape Islamic history for centuries to come. And it carried the spark of a cultural revolution, the spread of paper that would transform humanity's ability to write, record, and remember. Few battles can claim to have changed the world without changing borders. Talas was one of them. Legacy of Talas. Stand today by the river in modern Kyrgyzstan, and little remains of that battlefield. The hills are quiet, the water flows gently, the land is dotted with small villages. Yet the silence hides a memory. In those plains, civilizations collided, alliances crumbled, and betrayal redrew the fate of continents. From the ashes of Talas rose new powers, new ideas, and new ways of preserving knowledge. The clash of swords ended, but the clash of civilizations continued. Carried in the pages of books, the rise of empires and the enduring spread of faith. The Battle of Talas reminds us that history is not always written by the largest conquests or the grandest kings. Sometimes it is written in the betrayal of allies, the capture of artisans, and the quiet spread of ideas whose power outlasts armies. The river flows on, as it always has, but the world it reflects was forever changed in the summer of 751.